What's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So in this video, I want to figure out, are the gurus who invested in Seritage Growth Properties still bullish on that company? We've had some big news out recently. The CFO left, the CEO left. We heard from Phil Town just about a week ago that he's starting to get a little bit skittish about SRG as well. So, in the last couple of days, I dove into what some of the other gurus, some of the other super investors who own SRG are saying or doing about this company in their portfolios. So let's jump right into it. And I just want to do a quick recap of Phil Town here for those of you who didn't see my video a couple days ago. So Phil Town basically said in a Facebook Live session on Thursday, January 14th, when he found out Benjamin Shaw was leaving as CEO of SRG, he says it changed the story for him. He red flagged it. He took it out of one portfolio, kept it in another portfolio. He's really in the middle on it, right? He doesn't like the red flag. He thinks he understands where it's coming from, why the CFO, why the CEO have left. And he really thinks Berkshire Hathaway, as the backer of this loan to SRG, exercised their right to remove the upper management and kind of find management that they think is a better fit to kind of execute on SRG's plans to redevelop and create value. So that's where Phil Town's at. He sold some, he's hanging on to another, but he seems much less bullish than he was just a couple months ago when he said, he thinks this thing is going to be a 10-bagger over the next 10 years. So let's talk about some of the other guru investors. Guy Spier, okay? I think Guy Spier owns about, SRG makes up about 4 or 5% of his portfolio at Aquamarine Capital. You can see here, MOI Global, just this last week, had a Best Ideas Conference for 2021. So, they invited all of these great investors to share, their best stock ideas for this next year. And you can see here, Guy Spier was one of the speakers. And he shared 2 ideas. He shared Care Ratings, which is a company in India, and he shared Seritage Growth Properties, okay? So based on that, it appears that Guy Spier is still bullish on Seritage Growth Properties if he's pitching this idea at the Best Ideas Conference for Manual of Ideas. That's what MOI stands for. So if you guys can get access to this, definitely check out Guy Spier's talk. So that checks off Guy Spier. Mohnish Pabrai. How is Mohnish Pabrai seeing SRG as we enter 2021? So in my video a couple days ago, I had an amazing comment. And the comment went like this. And you can go back to that video and see. I pinned the comment. It said, the CEO left, announced that he was leaving, Benjamin Shaw announced that he was leaving on December 10th, 2020, okay? The CFO announced about a month before that. So the big question for people, for investors who own SRG is, okay, what does this mean? What does it mean that the CFO and the CEO are exiting? Should we be nervous about that? And a very astute subscriber pointed out the free lunch portfolio was revealed on the 23rd of December. Okay, so 13 days after Benjamin Shaw announced that he was leaving. Now, what's included in the 2021 free lunch portfolio? We've got Seritage Growth Properties from Pabrai funds. Okay. One of the 5 stocks in the cloning basket is SRG. And of course, Pabrai has, he can really exercise judgment in which stocks to include in the cloning basket. There's not a rigid kind of formula or a rigid approach that he goes through to select these. Okay, so to me, that's a case to be made that he's still bullish on SRG. But here's an even stronger case. Pabrai sent out a letter to shareholders in Pabrai funds. And I got this little snippet through someone who is a shareholder. He mentions Seritage Growth Properties in the letter to investors, and it was just a couple sentences. He says, over the next 5 to 15 years, they'll likely have fully transformed their core footprint into highly desirable mixed-use developments in prime areas of the country. We'll probably figure out what to do with it sometime between 2025 and 2035. Okay, so this is a long-term bet for Pabrai. It sounds like he's not really going to look at it too much until 2025, and he may hold on to it until 2035. So, very long-term. But again, that kind of supports this notion that Pabrai is still quite bullish on Seritage Growth Properties. So that's encouraging. Both Guy Spier and Mohnish Pabrai appear to be bullish. Now, they do a lot of talking. They seem to be buddies in terms of making investments, bouncing ideas off of each other. So it's possible that, they're kind of hyping each other up with regard to Seritage Growth Properties. So it would be nice to see someone, other than Guy Spier and Mohnish Pabrai, bullish out of these gurus. We've lost Phil Town a little bit. What about Warren Buffett and Eddie Lampert, right? So let's take a look at Warren Buffett. What we know about Buffett is, well, let's look him up. So I'm at the sec.gov website. I'm going to enter SRG, which is the ticker for Seritage Growth Properties. And I want to know, as of the latest annual report, how much stock in SRG does Warren Buffett own? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this DEF 14A, which is the proxy statement to the annual report. Okay, that's going to tell us kind of the 5% beneficial owners of this company. So I'm going to click on this first link, the DEF 14A. I'm going to scroll down to the table of contents. And I want this one, security ownership of 5% beneficial owners. That's going to tell us everyone outside of the company who owns more than 5% of the shares outstanding, the common Class A shares. So if we look all the way at the bottom here, we see Warren E Buffett, okay? 2 million shares of the Class A. So he owns a little over 5%, 5.2% of the Class A shares outstanding. Now there's a number here. So let's take a look at these footnotes. What does it say about Buffett? Beneficial ownership is based on ownership as set forth in the Schedule 13G filed by Warren E. Buffett with the SEC on December 10th, 2015. Okay? So it looks like Buffett bought sometime at the end of 2015, and he hasn't done anything with that ownership stake in, what is that, over 5 years. So that's pretty impressive. But I want to take a look at that. Let's see what that's about. So we're going to come back. Let's check out Warren E. Buffett. Now this is pretty cool in and of itself. You can kind of see what Buffett has personally been buying and selling through these filings. But I want to go all the way back to the end of 2015 to take a look at this. So here it is. I know it's this one, filed on 12/10/2015. You can see here Warren E Buffett, Seritage Growth Properties. So let's take a look at what's happening here. Date of event which requires filing of this statement. So he bought on November 30th, 2015, and it was filed 10 days after that. So you can see here he bought 2,000 shares. What's interesting is when he bought at the end of 2015, it made up a little over 8% of the Class A shares outstanding. So, maybe there was some dilution in that time. Maybe, there's operating partnership units for Seritage Growth Properties. Maybe a number of those have been converted. And so that had an impact. But it's pretty cool to see Buffett. I mean, the patience is incredible. Buying in at the end of 2015. And he's really sat on his hands for the last 5 years. And of course, Berkshire Hathaway owns the debt for Seritage Growth Properties. So, it's also interesting to see him kind of on the personal side with the equity, and then also on the business side with the debt. I also want to point out when Buffett bought these 2 million shares back at the end of 2015, they were around $36 per share. Today, they're about $15 per share, which is amazing to think, we can own these pieces of Seritage Growth Properties for less than half of what Buffett paid more than 5 years ago. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. But, I will note, as I said, in the previous form, this was filed in April of 2020, this proxy statement. So stuff could have happened in the last, 9 months or so. Buffett could have sold. We don't know. We won't know until the next proxy statement is filed, probably in mid-April of 2021 for Warren Buffett. I think that's the case. I think if you own less than 10% of the shares outstanding, you don't have to file as quickly as you do if you own more than 10% of the shares outstanding. So, I'm a little foggy on those rules, but, the last info we have about how much Buffett owns is back from April of 2020. So, we'll find out in a couple months if Buffett still owns. Lastly, we have Eddie Lampert. Okay, now Eddie Lampert owns the biggest stake of Seritage Growth Properties. It says in Data Roma that he only owns, SRG. That Eddie Lampert only owns 4.3. It only makes up 4.3% of his portfolio. And you can see the number of shares here. It looks like Pabrai owns way more shares than Eddie Lampert does. But the reason for that, Eddie Lampert owns a lot of the OP units, the operating partnership units, which can be converted into Class A shares of Seritage Growth Properties. And I think, that operating partnership unit structure was created, for tax benefits. So this is a lot misleading. Eddie Lampert owns, he's the largest shareholder of Seritage Growth Properties. Now, he also doesn't talk much. He doesn't, do talks at universities. He doesn't do interviews. So I have no idea what he's doing with Seritage Growth Properties. There was a filing made a couple weeks ago by Eddie Lampert through ESL Investments, which is his kind of investment vehicle. But it looked like there was just some very small selling. It was less than 1%. So not very meaningful in my opinion. So no activity from Eddie Lampert as far as I'm concerned. just want to do a quick search on Open Insider to see what's been happening. Brian Dickman was a CFO. Like I said, he left, so he looks like he made a big sale back in mid-September, kind of cashing out his stock. And then, the nearest transaction before that is by Eddie Lampert. Back in 2019. So, and that was actually a purchase. So, nothing recent on Eddie Lampert, nothing recent on Warren Buffett. Pabrai and Spier are bullish. Phil Town, a little skittish. He's not quite sure what to make of it. And I'm actually a little bit confused by that because, to me, the story has never been about who's managing SRG. And if Berkshire has, in fact, executed their right to kind of install the management team that they think is going to better execute for SRG, I think that's actually a bullish case to be made for SRG. And there's been a few people in corner of Berkshire in Fairfax who have been saying that, smart investors in there. So I don't quite understand what's happening with Philtown. I'm starting to actually wonder how much Philtown did his own work on SRG and how much of it was just kind of a blind cloner play, seeing that Spier, Pabrai, Buffett, Lampert were involved with Seritage Growth Properties. Not to harp on Philtown. I have a lot of respect for him. I'm just kind of confused about why he sold off maybe around half of his stake in SRG when Eddie Lampert announced that he was leaving. Not Eddie Lampert. Benjamin Shaw announced that he was leaving. So, interesting stuff. Most of the gurus still seem to be intact regarding Seritage Growth Properties, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And I'm personally kind of in the Pabrai camp where this is going to be a long-term development. It might not be clear that there's exciting things playing out for a couple of years. And that's going to be very hard for a lot of investors to sit with and be patient with. But in my opinion, therein lies the opportunity to practice that patience and, have faith in the valuations of the underlying real estate that Seritage owns. And just let the team execute on redeveloping these properties. So that's my plan. I just wanted to do a follow-up to that Phil Town video that I did a couple days ago. For those of you that kind of felt like you get left hanging, not quite sure, where to go. And of course, just because the gurus are doing something doesn't mean that you should blindly clone them. But, I think it's very valuable to look at what these very smart investors are doing who have a stake in Seritage Growth Properties. So I'm encouraged personally based on what I've seen from the super investors who were involved. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts about that. If you've been able to see this talk by Guy Spier, let me know. I'm very interested in getting a membership to Manual of Ideas. I'm not quite sure what the process is. It looks like there's a waiting list at the moment, but it seems like an incredible resource. So curious to hear from you guys. If any of you have gotten in, what that process was like. All right, guys, without further ado, I will leave it there, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.